Hello, welcome everyone. Go ahead and feel free to put your camera on, say hello. I'll get us started. I'm Dr. Heather Curl. I'm the Director of Leadership Development here at the Washington State School Board Association, or WSSDA. And we're really happy that you're here. This is the second of 4 candidate workshops. Yeah, what I do is I sort of offer training and support for board members. So should you get elected and that be your next step, you'll hopefully connect with me. And in the meantime, it's great to mute yourself when dogs are barking and other times too. But you are welcome at different points to ask questions and still be a part. I am now going to go off screen and let the facilitators actually introduce themselves and take it away. Go for it.
Thank you, Heather. So good afternoon, everyone. We're really excited to be joining you for something that's near and dear to both my and Lakeisha's hearts, having been elected board members ourselves. So my name's Mary Furtakis, and I was a 22-year board member in the Tukwila School District, and now I serve on the State Board of Education. Lakeisha?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lakeisha Phillips. I think I'm on my 7th year serving on the Federal Way School Board. And then been a consultant with WSSDA for a little bit here. Nice to virtually meet everybody.
Great. And you've been introduced to Dr. Heather Curl, and Rosmi also is part of the team that works with school board directors as we all are learning how to develop our leadership skills in this governance role. So for this workshop, this is the agenda of what we're going to be covering tonight, what school boards do and what they don't do, what the responsibilities are of individual school directors, what leadership looks like when you're serving as part of a team, because you're not an individual in a governance model, you're part of a team, and that team includes the superintendent. And then wanting to give you some ideas and resources for preparing yourself to serve. And I'm going to read this bottom part out loud, which is any type of video, audio, or photo recording of this presentation, the participants and/or the facilitators is prohibited. The PowerPoint and the handout are public, but participants have not given permission for anyone other than WSSDA to record these sessions. By attending this presentation, you indicate your agreement with these terms. So I just wanted to make that very clear at the front end before we dive in. Next slide, please. So in the email that you received for this opportunity, we included a link to this handout, the School Board Candidate Workshop, and this QR code if you weren't able to download it ahead of time. And Heather has also included the link to it if you want to pull it up to look at as we're going through the material. You will recognize some of these are actual slides from the presentation, and pulling out some of the high level things that we'll be covering again as a tool for you. Next slide, please. So knowing that people are in different situations, it's still great if you can have your camera on when possible. We certainly understand that that isn't possible for everyone. And I just wanted to, if you're not as familiar working with Zoom, if you happen to have a message come up that says internet unstable, we found that if you turn your camera off and give it a few minutes, that generally takes care of the issue. Should you get kicked out of the presentation, just enter back in and we'll readmit you. We would ask you to please stay on mute. We are going to be stopping at several points at in different sections to give you an opportunity to ask questions, things that you can put in the chat that we'll be monitoring, and we'll be getting to as many of your questions as we possibly can. And if you do have a question to ask as we're in one of those sessions, do feel free to take your audio off mute to participate. We also just wanted to make it clear that the focus of this candidate workshop is on learning about what it means to be a school board member and the responsibilities and how the structures work, as well as giving you resources. It is not geared towards looking at specific district issues or campaign issues. So. And if you're not familiar with using the chat box at the bottom of your screen, there is an icon that says chat. If you click on that, it will open up the chat box and you have the option to enter a message to everyone or to specific individuals. And we wanted to give you an opportunity to just practice your 30-second elevator speech. If you would like to enter into the chat box, why did you decide to run for the school board? And we're just going to give you a couple minutes if you choose to enter something. And so I'll just pause here for that. Hey, filing day felt like a call to action, a time to step up and serve my community. Thank you. I love my school community and want to give back. Running to bring stability to and restore confidence in the Seattle School District level's leadership and bring my parent and professional experience to the job. Great. Thank you so much. Okay, Lakeisha, it's on to you.
All right. Well, it is wonderful to meet you again. So I'm going to give you a little bit of orientation. We're going to start with, you might not be familiar with the organization of WSSDA. So I want to give you a quick introduction to WSSDA, which stands for the Washington State School Directors Association. And WSSDA has been around for 100 years, which is a pretty long time. And just to clarify, WSSDA isn't part of the governor's office. It's its own standalone agency, kind of like the Public Lands Commission. In fact, WSSDA is led by school board directors from across the state who were elected onto the WSSDA board by their peers. So just thinking of it as an organization that brings all the school board directors to kind of coalesce us into one work where we get support and get information as we do this job. So as you see, the state agency is authorized by the legislature to be self-governing. All WSSDA state public school directors are members. Leadership development, training, policy, and legal resources and legislative advocacy support is offered, and there is no regulatory authority for the organization of WSSDA as a whole. We'll go to the next slide. All right, so to ground our conversation, I'd like you to give an overview of how school governance is structured in the state of Washington. So, school board directors are elected by their local community to be a part of a statewide system. So understanding that entire system helps school board directors become effective in their efforts locally. So there are 295 public school districts, 7 state tribal education compact schools. There's 1,477 school board directors. So WSSDA is kind of that organization that gets to bring all that energy in. More than 160,000 employees, 1.1 million students, and the state budget is roughly around $12 billion. So I really do think of us, we kind of work at a local level, but what I quickly found is we also have to work as a larger team because we know our students don't stay in the same area. It's kind of like getting a service. You want to make sure that students are entering and exiting our systems and being able to kind of function well, which is something that took me a couple of years to learn, but really important. So local governance, statewide system. So who does what in education? So the first one you have there is the legislator. They make the laws and provide the majority of the funding. A small amount of that funding comes from the federal source for special programs, and additional funding, which is normally a small amount, comes from our local levies. So it really starts with the federal and state law. They make the laws, they provide the funding. Next up is OSPI and the State Board of Ed. So lots of acronyms. I was thinking about this when I read it. OSPI stands for the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, and then the State Board of Ed. They create the rules to implement the laws, and then OSPI distributes all the funding to the districts. So legislature, OSPI, State Board of Ed, OSPI continues the funding to the districts. Next up, you have oh, wait, there you go. School board, WSDA kind of supports the districts by creating the model policies based off of the laws for our local boards to adopt. So we'll talk more about policy adoption in a moment, but it is one of the primary roles of a school board director and a school board. If a district were to update their policies each year on their own, to keep up with compliance with the new laws and regulations on their own, it would cost quite a bit of money in legal fees. So that's why WSDA has a policy and legal branch. So they essentially have lawyers on hand who are experts in this work to kind of come up with those model policies. Because we had a law, moved to OSBI, and then it moves over to WSDA so we can get that model policy and adopt it at a local level. And then it goes to our school boards, which is governed locally through district policies and budgets. And on the school board, we also hire superintendents to operate the districts. So sometimes I kind of think of that wheel as a moving process that continues to go forth and how we govern on a local level. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about serving on your local school board. We're going to get focused on what's involved in serving on that local board level. So the first topic is, what is a school board director? So what do we mean by a school board director? In Washington state, school board members are also called school directors. They are elected by local residents of the school district and serve as a governing body. Most terms are 4 years. I think we have one person from Seattle. I think it's Seattle and Spokane that has 6 years. I think there's only 2 districts that have 6-year terms.
Seattle's
Still 4.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's
Spokane.
Everett has 6.
Oh, and
and
Tacoma.
Yeah.
Tacoma has 6. That's who it is. So most terms are 4 years. We have a few boards that are 6-year terms. And school board members are elected during the odd years. Board members may be appointed to fill a vacancy on their board, but they need to run for office the next election cycle in order to retain the office. So our next slide. Yep. So legal responsibilities. So where do the roles and responsibilities come from for school board directors? It's actually written in Washington state law, is the foundation of the responsibility for school board members. Some of the laws relate directly to the requirements for school board members, and many more are related to the operation of the district over which the school board members provide oversight. So as you can see, the section of the revised Code of Washington that regulates school is quite detailed. I wasn't surprised when I saw that number 67, but quite detailed. Another key law that impacts all of school board work is OPMA, Open Public Meeting Act. That law provides a lot of requirements on how boards govern and communicate. So it is important to know the OPMA, or Open Public Meetings Act, as a candidate, because the courts have ruled that this applies to elected officials even in the period between election day and when they are sworn in. So I don't think anybody told me that when I first ran for office, but I do think that's important to know. So those OPMA mandates that whenever a quorum of board communicates about school business, it must be done with prior notice to the community and within a public meeting. This greatly constrains the board's ability to communicate over email and text message, and even if they casually bump into each other in public. And that document was just dropped into the chat if you want to take a look at that or retain that for yourself. All right, so some of the legal responsibilities. Another important reminder is the oath of office for school directors is set by the state. Not only do school board directors consider school law and the Open Public Meetings Act, but they swear to uphold every law in the state and country. This is another way to consider what is done at a local district also has considerations on the statewide landscape. So as you see here on the screen, they put up the RCW so that you can kind of take that in. Every person is elected or appointed to office before entering upon discharging of these duties, therefore shall take an oath or affirmation to support the Constitution of the United States, state of Washington, and discharge their duties of office according to the best of their abilities. So it's kind of written in. All right, Mary, you're up.
Okay, so thanks, Lakeisha. So as part of what WSSDA does with its board training, we have a graphic and a visual that shows the breakdown of what our functions are and 3 different areas. So if you are elected to this office, when you're getting your training, we wanted you to see that this is how it's broken out, where you've got visionary leadership, effective governance, and strategic advocacy as the 3 umbrella areas that your governance functions fall under. And within that, we've broken it down into 3 different areas where you will have training modules that meet the other pieces. So next slide, please. We'll walk through very quickly what these are. So the first piece comes under the heading of commitments, and the 3 commitments of our board training and governance is related to equity, student success, and community engagement. And to be very clear, when we're talking about equity, it is based on the data that you're looking at. You will be, as a board member, reviewing a lot of data, and you'll be seeing gaps and disparities between different groups of students by different types of demographics. And so one of our responsibilities in looking at this is trying to figure out how we're closing these gaps, which then leads to the student success, which is one of our other commitments. Second piece is, next slide, principles. The principles that we base our work on is that we serve with integrity, we model collaboration. We'll go into this a little bit more because you don't have any individual authority as a board member. Your authority comes from working in collaboration with your board colleagues and the superintendent, and remaining in the board domain, the things that are actually within our realm of authority and responsibility. And the third piece is our mindset. So like I said, we will be, and you will be working with a lot of data. So our board boot camp training for new board members goes into a lot around how to look at data and the power of the question that you have. Looking at systems thinking, you are, as a governance body, you are thinking at the 30,000 foot level. Or the balcony level at your entire system when you're having your deliberations and making questions. And then innovation, what are the things that research is showing us are effective for going back to principles of student success. So that in total is what our training modules look like, the framework that we use when we're doing presentations. Like a lot of boards will take the series on your budget and different ways to understand what is in the budget, what the different functions are, et cetera. So we have multiple modules like that boards have the opportunity to take as their professional development training. So there are specific ways that the board governs the district. And again, you'll see all of these things. These are high level areas where the board realm rests. So setting the mission, the vision, and the goals. You will see that incorporated into your school district's strategic plan. And the strategic plan is your roadmap for guiding the district that everything should be aligned to. And when it is, you start seeing some really effective board superintendent teamwork. You see a lot of work that's able to happen within your buildings, et cetera. Another big responsibility is the budget, adopting the budget and your financial oversight responsibility as a monitoring piece. And you'll see a number of times we use the word monitoring here because that is something that you do a lot. And the budget adoption process takes months. It usually, for most districts, starts in January, February, needs to be adopted by the end of June and starts July 1st. So unfortunately, for anybody who runs for a school board office, when you come into that position, when you are sworn in for your first meeting in December, you're already halfway through the budget for that year, and you didn't have an opportunity, unless you are serving on your district's budget review committee, to have input on what that looks like. So we recognize that just because of the timing of the cycle, that can be a frustrating thing for new board members. And it's also an opportunity for you to be asking a lot of questions so that when that cycle starts up again, to be adopting the next budget the following year, you'll feel more comfortable in being able to do that. Community engagement is really important. You are elected to be a steward of public dollars and to represent your community, and that means your entire school community. You may have a number after your name for your position, but that is for geographic distribution. Our responsibility is to be serving every child that is within our school district boundaries. Adopting policies and monitoring implementation. That's another key function that you have. Your policies are the things that provide the legal framework within which the board does its business and its work. So making sure that your policies are up to date, that you're reviewing them on regular cycles. Many school boards will take one section of the policy manual, maybe the 1000 series, which is the one specific to the board, and they review one section per year, which keeps you on about a 6-year cycle of reviewing policies so that you are staying up to date. Hiring and evaluating the superintendent is another huge responsibility that you have. And want to reiterate here that the board has only one employee, except Seattle has 2, but for everyone else, the superintendent is the board's only employee, and any other hiring or evaluation for any other employee in the district is done by their immediate supervisor. And in evaluating, you're required to do this on a yearly basis. Every board has an evaluation process, and that is a locally controlled process. The law requires you to do it on a yearly basis. And then once again, there's that word monitoring. You're monitoring district performance. So in all the presentations that come to you, the questions that you're asking in those presentations to see how things are progressing. What does the data look like? How is this aligned to the strategic plan and the action plans for that year? All of those things come under monitoring district performance. Next slide, please. So this is the wonderful little chart about what boards do and what they don't do. So as we've already mentioned, the boards evaluate and oversee the superintendent. Superintendent acts as the CEO of your system, but the board is the governance body that provides direction to the superintendent. The board approves curriculum, and there's a very lengthy process in most districts about how that comes about, with a curriculum committee of staff and community members, sometimes students if it's involving high school curriculum, piloting, all of these things in the process that then comes to the board for final approval. You create the policies that will be enacted through procedures. So the board approves the policy, which is the framework, and then the procedures are developed and created and revised by your staff. And they are the way the policy gets implemented in your buildings and throughout your system. You represent the entire community, including your students, and we talk a lot about student voice in WSSDA. Fascinating, Washington State has the highest number of student representatives that serve on school boards in the country, and they have their own wonderful network and are very much a part of the work we do as when we have our annual conference, when we go to Olympia to advocate, etc. And then you approve the district policies and budget. Now, what boards don't do on the other side of this line, next slide, please. You do not evaluate or terminate staff except for the superintendent. That is, recommendations will come to you from the superintendent about perhaps terminating staff, but that is not, that is you as putting the final vote on that. That is not you evaluating and making the determination that that's going to happen. You do not oversee what and how teachers teach or how coaches coach. That's considered operations, and the people that are teaching and coaching have people that they report to who are their supervisors and evaluators. You don't create procedures that define how your policies are going to be enacted. So that would be something like let's take, for example, you've got a discipline policy. The procedures for that would be created by your staff, and those would be the types of things that you would then see in your student handbook. Part of the reason why the board is not involved in that is it's considered a management function, not a governance function. And it also allows for more flexibility if there are revisions that need to be made, because the policy adoption process is a formalized process. You do not get presented with a policy and approve it in the same meeting. We have what's called a first reading, where you're looking through it and you're looking at recommended revisions or updates. You're able to ask questions. All of that information then comes back to you at another meeting for what they call second reading. Sometimes there will be more revisions, and then it would come back for a third meeting, and then you would adopt it. But sometimes you're able to, if everything was covered after second reading, you can have it as an action item on that agenda for that meeting. You do not represent one constituency. When we say all means all, when we're talking about our students and what their needs are and representation, we represent each student that is within our school district boundaries. And you don't set school rules. Those would actually sometimes fall under the procedures heading. You set the framework, the policy that then leads to what rules are adopted. Next slide, please. So let's see.
That's
This
me.
is back
Unless
to
you
you.
want to do this one, you're welcome.
No, go right ahead.
All right. Don't worry. We'll have a section here where you can ask a question. So if anybody has questions, feel free to jot them down or put them in the chat. So one that people tend to ask a little bit about is the role of the board in curriculum. So it is, I think, important to highlight that kind of on the screen, that establishing the district's curriculum standards is consistent with the state law. I know we were just talking about this at our school board meeting recently, that there's actually a pretty clear line that the state law has outlined as to what the practice is. Shown on the screen here, the state and the school district's goals relative to instructional materials. They have to establish an instructional materials committee. The recommendations of the instructional materials shall be by the district's instructional materials committee in accordance with the district policy, and approval or disapproval shall be by the local school district's board of directors. So as an example, like in our state, obviously our policies follow state law. It kind of goes through the process. I think what's important to know is the board's responsibility is to be in close communication with your superintendent, to make sure to talk about the parameters and what we're doing, be familiar with the process, understand the process, ask questions, but know that the state has already outlined a process. Following that, listening to your recommendation of your committee and then bringing that to the board. I know as a board superintendent team, we have that conversation like, hey, here's what's coming up. Here's what we need to look at. Here's why we're looking at it. Here's what the state law says. Here's our process. It takes us a good year and a half to get through the process. Listen to the committee goes out and pilots, practices, student feedback, parent feedback, and then it comes to the board for that final adoption. So I think sometimes people are not aware that the state isn't picking our curriculum. That does come to the school board, but there are state standards that need to be matched and a process that needs to go with it. I feel like that was a short story, but it felt pretty poignant. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. The board's role in financial oversight. I would say for me, I don't know about you, Mary, this was probably the biggest learning curve for me because there are so many laws that are layered into this work. So let's see, it says, let's look at the board's role around financial oversight and policy adoption to again illustrate how state law informs how a board does its work. This is the language directly from the law regarding the board's role in proper operation of their district. So you kind of see there it says operation, oh, no, not that one. The operation of their district is the local community and its electorate. The settings of the policy ensure quality in the content and extent of its educational program. That such program provides students with the opportunity to achieve those skills, which is generally recognized as a requisite to learning. So the budget process is pretty strenuous. Your district will work on making sure that you have good communication. They're talking about here's what our state revenue is, here's what our federal revenue is, right? Here's our other revenue, here's what local dollars are doing. And it's a tough act of like really following all the laws that are for each individual area. There's laws around ASB funding, there's laws around general funding, there's laws around transportation funding, there's laws around MSOC funding, material supplies and operating costs has been a big conversation. Even as we advocate as school districts, you may have heard districts are like, hey, we really got to talk about our prototypical funding model and etc. So that is one of the major things that school board directors do. That is a year-round process. You were looking at your budget, probably every meeting and having big conversations pretty regularly. Does that seem fair, Mary? I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, next slide. So now we've talked about this massive amount of work. I kind of want to bring it into one document because I know I am one that like, if I'm going to take on a role, I want to be good at it. So WSSDA has already kind of pulled together some research and best practices around the topics like curriculum and financial oversight. On the WSSDA website, you're going to find the Washington State School Board standards. So the standards are supported with over a decade of research documenting how and what a board does and how a board can boost or drag down student outcomes. So that was just dropped into the chat. I know I didn't actually get to this document until my second year, and I wish I would have saw it better. When we go to our conferences, there are actual institutions and universities that literally just do research on the effectiveness of school boards and like, what is that impact on student outcomes? Like, I didn't know what we do in that room can actually determine what happens for kids and their educational outcomes. So this is a good starting point to really figure out what does some of that work mean. Okay. So now it is your turn. We've just gave you a lot of set and get information. Do you have some questions for us well broken in school board directors?
Actually, I do have one. You mentioned this earlier, but didn't go into it here. And sorry, I don't have my light on because it's too hot right now to have the light in my face. But so sorry, I'm in the shade. But around community engagement as a responsibility for the school board. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about that, or if you are planning to, because I think that there are different views of that about where the responsibility sits, whether that's a responsibility for the district staff and their community engagement staff, and or with the school board. And I totally understand listening to your constituents who have elected you, but I'm just curious about the community engagement piece.
Well, we are going to talk about it a little bit, but we can certainly go into that now because it might not be specific. What we're going to be covering, because it's high level, might not be specific to what you're talking about. One of the things is that any kind of response that we give you is going to be very context dependent. There isn't a silver bullet because every community, every one of our 295 school districts is different. The diversity amongst them all is a thing. It is real. And so what community engagement looks like in one place might not look the same in another place, and something that would be very effective in one setting might not be in another. But to the point of responsibility, Okay, you are publicly elected by your community. The community, the district should have structures in place for your community to engage with you in your open public meetings, which we usually have as a public comment, listening sessions. I would say study sessions also, Lakeisha, are a really excellent tool because those are opportunities for the board to take some extra time to educate themselves about a topic of interest, and they're open to the public because all your meetings are open to the public, and except for the very narrow confines of what an executive session is. So I always found those to be incredibly helpful opportunities because you can structure them however you want. As a board, you can have a couple of questions that you just want people to respond to. You can bring in experts, either on your staff or external experts on a topic or from the community, to be giving you feedback. And the nice thing about these is that there's no action being taken when you're doing a study session or a listening session. It truly is that opportunity to listen and learn with each other. And there are definitely, things that would be a community engagement team that's on staff for some specific things that are going on. And then there's also the part of, the board wants to get input. A great example would be if you're hiring a superintendent. There would be the board that would be under the board's responsibility because they're hiring that person to be saying, we want community engagement opportunities for people to tell us what they want to see in their next superintendent. Now, the brass tacks logistics of setting that up would be coming from your staff to do it, but that's something that would be under the board's responsibility as part of that hiring process for the superintendent. Is that making sense? Okay, Lakeisha, anything you'd like to add to that?
Sure, I think I would add, again, it's just working with your board superintendent team. There's no like law on community engagement and what it exactly looks like. So I would just say working with your board superintendent team. For our school district, we actually have it written in policy, like here's what we're going to do for community engagement. I think we have 3 scheduled community connect events. Like we do a weekly newsletter out to community. We make sure that it gets in the newspaper. Like we have a couple of strategies in place that we agreed upon as a team to do. Because you have to have a work balance. We're going to talk about the amount of time that you're spending as a school board director as an unpaid.
Yeah. And I just want to respond in the chat. People were asking, we're using terminology, study session, learning session, listening session. They're basically the same thing. Under your meeting structure, they would be considered the same type of thing where you're going in depth on a topic, you're not making any decisions. So again, that's also something that's a local context, what people actually call them. You can call them whatever you want. It's what the structure is, which is designed for you to be able to go more in depth on a topic and be able to bring in people to be a part of that conversation that might not normally be a part of it. All right. Okay, so next up, now we're going to spend a little bit time talking about the team that you're going to be working with should you be elected. So next slide, please. So when we talk about the governance team, we are specifically talking about the either 5 school board members, or in the case of Seattle, 7, plus your superintendent. You are the governance team. Together, you are responsible for leading the school district, even though that leadership takes different roles. That you think back to that slide we went over of what school boards do and what they don't do. So, but together, all those functions work together. It's just there's that separation of who's responsible for what. You are most effective when you're working together, when you've got the same district goals and within those unique roles that you have. The district goals are generally tied to the strategic plan. And so that is, for most districts, the foundational piece of setting the direction and the goals that come from that. And what that also then does is because your mission and your vision are a part of this, it helps keep you focused on these things with that shared vision that you're working towards that. And it's taking into account there's a reason why this structure is in place. You have multiple perspectives that are being represented, that are representative of your community. And most boards also recognize that with them either having 5 or 7 people, they're not representing all the perspectives. And so that's where community engagement becomes important, because we do know from research that the more perspectives you bring into decision making, that the better that decision is going to end up being, because you've considered a lot of different things as a part of your deliberations. And then by law, we're going to spend a little time on this. Individual school directors have no legal authority. Your authority is exercised and is in place only during that time period where you are in a publicly noticed meeting with a quorum of board members and you have an agenda with action items on it. That is the only time you have any authority legally. We should talk about this a little bit, because that when I got on the board was something that I had to spend some time helping my community understand. And I actually did a School Board 101 session with our PTA, the different PTAs in our district, to help them understand that, because it was very interesting and totally understandable that when we think of elected officials, what people are most familiar with are the people who serve in your state legislature or who serve in Congress. They are elected as individuals. They can say whatever they want. They can promise you whatever they want. Whether they deliver on it is something else, but they have the ability to do that. In a governance structure, we don't. But because this is what people are used to seeing, the assumption is made that that is the way you are going to be as an elected official. And so we're doing everybody a really great service by helping them understand also that do-don't chart, so that people understand where the authority lies for different things. And that is tough, because you do have if you are a school board member, you have a title that comes with that, and that has some positionality, and then people assume that there's a level of authority that goes with that. So it is one thing that we've all learned, that we have to be very careful about what we say because of that positionality, because of that title, and because of the assumption that people make that you can do some things that they're not necessarily aware of that you can't. Next slide, please. So collaboration is a word that we use a lot. And again, that working together where you have different functions, but you're all under that same shared vision from your strategic plan and what you're wanting to try and do for your students, is the thing that brings you together. And then that check and balance of the cycle of monitoring and evaluation that we referenced earlier, where information's brought to the board, you're making decisions, your staff takes it out to do implementation, then they're bringing it back to you to be reporting progress. That's part of your monitoring. You're asking questions, revisions and clarification happens, and then it goes back out to that implementation piece. So that functions when that cyclical structure of collaboration is in place. That's where we see from research where you have highly functioning board superintendent teams, and there is absolutely a direct connection to student achievement when that leadership team is working in tandem with each other. So while conflict is just, real quick, so conflict is a part of life, and it's a life skill on how we manage it. So this is, that's an area where the things that you can do with communication and the types of operating principles you have in place, how you interact with each other, what you know about your colleagues, getting to know them and developing relationships to understand what is important to them. All of those things contribute to being able to work in that highly effective cyclical team environment. You'll find that you do a lot of listening, and that's really important. You're wanting to be thoughtful. there's a reason why we have our meetings in public. It's important for your public to know that you are being thoughtful, that you are having deliberations about what's going on as you are working towards making a decision on whatever the topic is. An example I like to use that was really helpful for me, one of my board colleagues, when he shared with us that he had experienced homelessness growing up in our school district, it gave me and the rest of us clarity as to why that particular topic was coming up a lot, and he was wanting to ensure that the impacts of children experiencing homelessness was a part of our conversation. So that was really helpful for us to have that context about why that was really important to him. And it also then, grew our own understanding that we started, you start thinking about, okay, how does this impact students experiencing homelessness? And that then becomes, again, part of what you do. And again, because we were considering lots of different kinds of impacts on different groups of students, we felt we were growing and making better decisions. And when we talk about debating, it's oftentimes we'll talk about we debate the issues, we don't debate each other. It's really important that we are being and modeling what it actually looks like to have civil conversations with each other, because it doesn't serve anyone well if we are turning things into personal issues. And yes, you can be very frustrated on a board, and definitely in 22 years, votes didn't go my way all the time. And you learn from that. That is a part of it. This is why we are a democracy, and that's just the way it works. And it does work when we're willing to say and acknowledge, yep, that's the way it is. Didn't get that one, but maybe next time. Next team, or next slide. Continuous improvement is what we strive for. You're going to be coming into very complex systems. An education system is really complex. There's a lot going on. And your professional development is just as important as the professional development that your district funds for your instructional staff and everyone else who is an employee in your system. So this is one of the reasons why WSSDA provides what it does in the way of training for our board directors. And that's why we want to have that growth mindset. We really encourage people to be curious and lean in and ask questions, so that people know that you're listening when you're asking questions about what their concerns are. And again, knowing that it's a process of continuous improvement to work towards the goals we've got. Next slide. We do need to be respecting diverse input and perspectives. I definitely, over the course of different issues, as we were talking about things, I found myself moving in from where my original position was. And sometimes I didn't, that is your prerogative. But I do know that by listening, leaning in, being respectful of the different life experiences that my board colleagues had and what that brought to the table was really helpful. And it's okay to disagree. One of the things you do hear as a concern sometimes in the community is people use the term, the board is rubber stamping what the superintendent brings to them. And that's a problematic perception. So the fact that you are disagreeing civilly and bringing up different perspectives actually really shows your community you are taking the time with your deliberations, and that over that process of time before you make a decision, they can see that, how you have come to that. This is language directly from board standard number 1. And so I'll just read it since it's stated so well. An effective board provides effective district governance by promoting healthy relationships, by communicating supportively, inspiring, motivating, and empowering others, and exercising influence in a positive manner. And as part of our board self-evaluation in this is one of the things we rate ourselves on. Next slide, please. Also from the standards, oh, did you? Yes, so this is another another way to show this same type of thing, because we live in a very diverse society. So this issue of being respectful of others is pretty important for an effectively running board superintendent team. So the other part of this is an effective board solicits input from staff and a wide spectrum of the community so that a diverse range of interests and perspectives on issues is considered. Back to you, Lakeisha.
Okay, so next up, we're going to talk about the primary responsibilities of the school board. There you go, perfect. Wait, I think we missed a slide. Do we need to go back one? Go back one. Well, okay, well, let me go. Every community evolves over time. Just think about how jobs that we have preparing kids is different for every job. I'll just say that the primary responsibility is really about serving each and every student. Okay, we'll go to the next one. So we can start by considering our students and look at some of the information from the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. So that's OSPI. And we have a diverse set of students in our state. And as we can see from this chart from the website, shows that they provide this data for every district in the state. So you can also look up the demographics for your state. So I always kind of like looking at this data just to see what does our student different demographic look like. You can also look at the programs of the students that you're serving. One thing that I do and challenge myself and my fellow school board directors, I remember asking this at a meeting and everybody kind of paused. And I said, the incoming class of kindergartners, what year are they graduating? And everybody on my board just kind of had to blink and think about it for a minute. I said, we are making decisions on behalf of the graduating class of 2037. I take that as a really big responsibility, thinking about this group moving into the workforce at 2037. So I just love that we can kind of look at our students in various types of ways. Yeah, next slide. So here you will see effective school board directors also consider the programs and the characteristics of their students. This is how OSBI characterizes student groups and demographics. So you can also look up your own district's information on the OSBI website. There's a drop-down box for your district to really get into what does your district look like specifically. So like for my school district, we have 21,000 students. We have 76% of our students are free and reduced lunch. We have close to 50% are multilingual learners. We have over 115 languages in our district. So it's kind of important that you not only know the larger landscape of our state, but also what does your demographics look like in your specific district. All right, so now, again, we have some time for questions. What are you wondering, or what questions do you have? You can either say them out loud or put them in the chat.
And just wanted to note that Heather dropped in the chat box the link to the OSPI portion of the website where you can find the demographic information that was just shared for you, and then you can fill in your district's information to see what that looks like.
Perfect. Okay, if you disagree with something that needs to or will inevitably pass, can directors abstain for voting? Or are they required to vote yes or no each time? That is a good question. Abstentions are welcome. I'll just speak on my behalf. I think it's important to just vote. I always vote my position and I explain it. We also on our board really work through our problems. So earlier when we were talking about work studies, normally when you're voting on something, it's something you've been working on and preparing for a while. So we don't ever get to a vote like out of the blue. So we're normally having work studies and information and sessions So normally by the time we get to a vote, if you have a well-working machine, it's probably not a surprise to anybody on your board, where you stand, your superintendent, or your community for that matter. So for me personally, I just normally vote. And then I make it a point, and it's part of our board policies, that once a vote is done, we stick with that vote. And so we don't like per se talk about it afterwards. Like, well, I didn't agree with my board. We just stick with the board took a public vote on this, and this is where it landed. And if you have feedback, feel free to email us or let us know. But we normally just try to make a good practice to just stick with it.
Yeah.
I hope that helps.
And so the yes, no abstention process is there for, multiple reasons. I will say an abstention there's also recusing yourself from a vote. And I had to do that one time because we were getting a presentation related to a vendor that we were going to need to vote on. And I knew both of the people who were presenting that. And so in order to avoid any appearance of conflict of interest because of a personal relationship, I recused myself, and you announce that publicly that you're recusing yourself, and why. And so then the vote goes on the way it does. And, there are different reasons that people might abstain. In some cases, which, like, as Lakeisha said, if you've had the kinds of discussions that people have, gotten a lot of information, they've had a lot of chance to think about it, it should be a pretty rare occasion that this happens. But sometimes there are times when someone feels they really aren't prepared yet to make that vote. And again, hopefully you've got the communication protocols in place where you're communicating that with your colleagues, and then you move forward. And as Lakeisha said, one of the things we talk about is everyone, up until the time of a vote, everyone gets their say, but you don't always get your way. So once the vote has been taken, it is a standing protocol for highly functioning board superintendent teams is that you do not undermine that decision. You can disagree, you can say whatever you want, but once that vote has been made, as part of a governance team, you do need to be not trying to undermine that decision in public. I will also say after 22 years that there are times when I think one of the most courageous things a board can do is that if you do receive additional information after a decision has been made, that you are willing to go back and revisit that vote. Because you can only, here's a pretty key principle for you and why the power of the question is important. You can only make decisions based on the information that you are provided. If you are given incomplete information, you aren't necessarily going to be able to make the best decision that you could. And so that's one of the reasons why these things tend to take longer than some people might be comfortable with, because you want to make sure that your questions are answered, that you do have the information that you need.
We have another question about public records. So can you share information about public record for board members on non-district records? Are the rules the same for candidates? I know the answer, but Mary, did you want
Yeah, go ahead.
Same for candidates. I don't think that's really a tough one. I would just say rule of thumb, because school board directors can be sued. Let me be clear about that. OPMA is a real thing. There are fines attached. It's like most of them are $500 to $1,000, but there are fines associated. So I would just be very mindful. Read OPMA. Very boring. I actually found an OPMA training on YouTube. It was the Attorney General, and he walked through all the laws. So if you want to know more about OPMA, feel free to watch it, and it has the contact information. You can email them and they'll answer the question. When it comes for board members, I think the one thing that surprised me is all records are public record. So just being mindful. I tried to tell one of my colleagues, she was like taking all these notes and like writing, I don't know, notes during the meeting. And then she started shuffling and putting them in her bag. And then somebody's like, yeah, no, I'd like a copy of your notes that you just wrote. And she was mortified, but that is considered a public record. It was done in a public meeting. Therefore, it is open to the public. So I would just say watch the OPMA laws. we have a link to the document. I think we shared already. And yeah, just kind of be mindful.
There's also, this question came up with one of the earlier candidate sessions about social media and records, et cetera. And it is a best practice for you to have a separate social media account that is your personal things and the things that are associated with your public office. You'll see a lot of legislators, they'll have, this is my personal account. This is my one publicly where I talk just about business related to the position that I have, and keeping that separation very clear it's a protection for you. And again, like I said, because of your positionality and your title, and because people don't necessarily understand that you don't have authority unless you're in that particular setting that I described, your things that are considered personal or that you would consider personal, someone could try to make the case that no, in fact, this was public. And kind of a good rule of thumb is just to think about anything that, this could potentially could end up as a public record. Is this something that I wanted to have in writing or a record of?
Yeah, including your cell phone, emails. I have a district phone. I have a district email, and I kind of keep all that stuff over there so it's readily available, which tends to help me function a little bit better.
Miranda, did we answer your question?
Okay, she said yes.
She nodded
Okay.
yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay.
All right, with no further questions, what slide are we on? 39, making the commitment. So finally, let's talk about some of the logistics of being a school board director. Have you considered these questions? How much time is it going to take? How can I expect to spend that time? How will I ensure I'm prepared? And what do I need to learn to be effective? We're going to answer some of those questions. Next slide. All right, so school board members, I don't know if you know this, they work incredibly hard. WSSDA sends out a survey periodically to track workload. Most board members spend between 16 to 25 hours per month, and more than a third spend 16 hours or more monthly. But it varies depending on your level of involvement. But as you can kind of see in this chart, the time you will spend working on as a school board director has increased significantly over time. I will say, yeah, I probably spend about, mine is a little more. I'd say 10 to 15 hours a week being a school board director. There's a lot of reading, there's a lot of research, there's a lot of conversations. There's responding to community requests, community emails, touring schools. There's kind of a lot that goes into it. So I do think it's kind of up to you. By law, we have to attend our school board meetings. I think that's the floor, is you have to go to your school board meetings. So everything else above and beyond. But as you guys just shared, if you don't do the above and beyond, people are like, hey, this school board director isn't anywhere. So it's kind of a little bit of and you want to know, like in my district, we have 38 buildings, 21,000 students. That's a pretty big breadth of work. We've got almost 3,000 homeless kiddos spread across our district. So there's just certain dynamics and situations and programs that I personally would like to go see, connecting with community, understanding it, so that when I see it, I think I can be a little bit more informed on what's going on.
If I can add one thing here, I just wanted to note that the last time that this is documented was in 2021, which was during COVID when we were shut down. And so there was more going on because of the combination of people being at home, plus we were constantly having to adjust to new things happening. So I think until we get the information from 2023 or another one, I would not make the assumption that that is continuing to go up and up and up.
See, I don't know. I feel like the level of comprehension that you need is getting more complex. Like our models are more complex, our schools are more complex, the problems are more complex. As you guys know, the laws are consistently changing. So to me, it's like, wait, once you get something locked in, I feel like something changes. Or once you feel like you got it, you got new board members. Once you feel like you understand, you got new cabinet members. Once you feel like you got it, oh, 3 new languages from somewhere else. And you're like, okay. So I feel like you're consistently learning and adjusting as you move through your practice as a school board director. And
I totally agree. I'm just trying to be very careful of the correlation versus causation piece of that, and in looking at data. And there was a question, Heather, I'm not sure if you can respond to this, asking about, I'm not sure if we actually track percentage of full-time people with full-time jobs and those who don't have full-time jobs that are board members.
That's right. That's an interesting information, would be riveting. We don't track it in part because that's ever changing. So you can keep in mind that every 2 years, who are board members shifts quite a bit, right? With the election cycle. And then of course our jobs are always shifting as well. So it's data that's kind of hard to get your hands on, if that makes sense, because it's always changing. But we do know that there's such a wide variety of people who participate in school board work. Some of them are parents, and so their work hours are kind of when kids are in school, right? Because they're able to do that. And then others have full-time jobs, so their work hours are in the evening, and that's when board meetings are, and on the weekends. So what I can say is that there's not a consistent time that works for every board member to do things. And I think that speaks to just the diversity of the membership and how it really is reflective of the community in a lot of ways, because they're all doing different stuff. So no data, but it would be interesting to see.
yeah, and I think I'll just add one thing that I really enjoy, and somebody told me this actually when I was running for office. I ran into somebody who was they were running for a seat on Harborview Hospital's board. And I was like, Harborview, how? I don't know. I just didn't think about that. I didn't know that was a public position. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what that would be like. I'd be so intimidated to work with nothing but doctors all day. I was like, what a snore fest. And then I realized now as a school board director, I work with probably 20 or 30 doctors every day. So some of that is you're working with high-powered professionals who are passionate about this work. So when my superintendent starts talking, I feel like I have to take a deep breath and prepare my brain for the onslaught of deep level thinking that is happening. So just keep in mind, you're working with a high-powered team, normally of doctors and experts. And just that curve alone for me was like, okay, here we go. And that kind of took a little bit to get used to the acronyms, the language, the systems level thinking, the strategic planning, kind of all of this moving thing that you're just catching up with. So it gets better over time though. 7th year in, I'm feeling like I understand the wheel a little bit more. All right, I'll take us to our next slide. What am I on? 41, 42? Okay, that's you, Mary. Oh, 41, making the commitment. I will explain. So yes, you have board meetings. Those are required by law. So you do have to attend your board meetings. You have work study. I highly recommend those. Your work study for me is preparation for the meeting. So you normally have things on your work study agenda. That is where you get to ask questions, review information, ask for feedback, kind of get the picture before it gets to the school board meeting. So a lot of times, I think somebody said it earlier, people aren't aware that school board directors have been prepping for this and training for this, literally training for this. So when you get to the school board meeting, it kind of seems a little bit more effortless, but it probably was a work study item for a month or two. Like we've been working on our budget for months. We won't actually vote on it till August. So by the time we get to August, it'll probably look like a walk in the park, but we've already met on it twice. And I think we have 2 more meetings to go. So work studies, bargaining is a thing that is consistently happening. We have, I think 7 or 8 different unions in our district, and they're all on varying schedule. A lot of times people think of the one big one. They don't realize that there's quite a few involved in there. So that happens. Community connects are engaging with the public. We partner with our city and do coffee and connect with community. We have our 3 district community connects. We have our school board award nights, which is normally 7 nights a year, and then graduation. So lots of engaging with the community. Professional development trainings like tonight, WSSDA is offering trainings year round to kind of engage us, to help us I found WASDA to be helpful because at first I was just in my district and I had so many questions and I had such imposter syndrome. WASDA was a sweet relief because I could ask every question under the sun and they were like, yes or no, that is not true, which is really, and just having legal advice outside of your district was helpful. Scheduled school visits, I do those pretty regularly, probably twice a month. Advocacy at the state and federal level, also something that can take some time. WASDA has a committee. I'm actually chair of the WASDA Ledge Committee. It can take some time to get involved in that, but available. And then events, so school district events, WASDA events, etc. So those are all the things that are kind of under the wheelhouse of being a school board director, not to scare you, but it's all there. And it all kind of works together and helpful. The more you're in all of those spaces, the more you kind of understand what's going on. Are the WASDA trainings free for school board members? Heather?
Mo- Most of them are.
I think so.
Yeah,
Well,
most of the trainings are, if we're doing things like this or what we call lunch and learns, or when things are offered like during the year, we have we'll talk about in a minute, but we have a new board member boot camp at our annual conference. But then if you're not able to attend that during the year, we take segments of that as a lunch and learn opportunity, and people can participate in them virtually.
but
And
some
we
of
have
them you have to pay for. Board boot.
some, yeah.
Yeah.
So the full board boot camp you do have to pay for. There's official trainings which cost $90 or $100 depending on if they're virtual or in person. And those are 2.5-hour trainings. We have them in both finance, kind of financial learning, and equity based on the required state law and from 2022. So those are, and then we have a large annual conference, which we'll talk about in a few slides, I believe, and there is a cost for those, although there are scholarships available for districts that are in binding conditions or can't otherwise pay for it. But as Mary mentioned, this is free, of course, and then other kind of lunchtime virtual meetups, particularly if you're a new board member. We have something called a new director network, and that's a monthly hour connection where you all come together on Zoom, similar to here, and we kind of talk through, as Mary mentioned, each of those components of the board boot camp in a kind of cohort style with folks that hopefully you'll join us each month. So that'll get started in January once we have a new cohort. So that is free. And then we have a ton of resources available online that are also free. So yeah, I'm happy to connect with folks later to get details around all that.
Cool.
Thank you. Mary, you're up next.
I am up next. So we're going to talk. So with all of this, I would imagine that you might be feeling a little bit overwhelmed. Want you to encourage you to take a big, deep breath, because this is all very, very dependent on a lot of different circumstances. But there are some things that we found that you can do in preparation to help educate yourself about this role. One of the best things you can do between now and November is to attend board meetings. Not gonna lie, it feels like a fire hose for about the first 18 months or so. You have to kind of go through a full budget cycle in your district to start feeling like, okay, I kind of have I feel like I know a bit about what's going on here. So if you're attending board meetings, you're going to be pretty up to speed with the issues that are going on, so that when you step into this role, it's not as strong a fire hose that you're encountering. Talking with the superintendent. Schedule a time or two to talk with the superintendent. Bring your questions. That is absolutely something that is a great learning opportunity for you, as well as talking to board members. Schedule a time to talk to them. Ask them, what it was like for them, coming on and being new, or if they, what kinds of advice they might have, or, asking for context around some issues. They're more than willing to chat with you. As we've provided for you, looking up your district student achievement data on the OSPI website, it's actually a really great resource where you can find out a lot of things about your district that is helpful. It's also a great way, because even when you're looking at data points, there's always an understory. about why things look the way they do. So looking that up and then being able to go talk to your superintendent or a board member about what you saw is a really great way to get context around some things. Checking out your own school district's website and doing the same thing. You know, what questions do you have? What did you see? And be able to, you know, go to these folks for, see if you can get clarification. Reviewing your strategic plan, your district goals and the mission. I would say that's a pretty foundational, fundamental thing to be doing, because if districts are using these strategic plans and have the district goals, it explains a lot about why they're prioritizing the things that they are and making some of the decisions that they're making. And then, of course, because it's very key to what you do is representing the community. Make sure you're talking to community members as you're out there campaigning, parents, students, school staff, and getting their perceptions and perspectives about what's going on. Next slide, please.
Mary, can I add one?
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say asking what your governance model is. A lot of times walking into a school board, I think you have an idea of what they're doing, but if you don't know what governance model they have, that can throw you off. I didn't even know what a governance model was when I got on a school board. So
Yeah.
if you haven't asked yet, what is your governance model? And just doing a little bit of research about like what that is and what does it mean, I
Yeah.
think would be something. And then just understand school districts are well-oiled machine. At least I feel prideful about ours. Ours is so many of these decisions are already made. Like as a school board director, I'm already passing decisions for this year and the following year. So when you walk in, you're going to be like, why are we talking about 2027? I'm like, I didn't agree to this. And I'm like, yeah, that was already voted for. So just kind of understand you're walking in the machine that's already on the move.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great points. Appreciate that. So this is also, we talked about lunch and learns. Here's an opportunity for you as you are campaigning. You all should have filed some initial paperwork with the Washington State Public Disclosure Commission. And be sure you're very aware of the deadlines that they have for during your campaign of when different types of things need to be filed. But we provided this for you so you can see that they also are offering free opportunities like this on very specific things for the campaign process that you can tune in and be a part of the webinars virtually that they're offering on these dates. And this can also, you can register, you can see the link down here on the Public Disclosure Commission website. Next slide. This is an awesome guide that WSSDA has put together for you on our publications page on our website. And it's the guide for what it takes to be an effective school board member. Some of the things we've talked about are in there. And so as a resource to be able to go back, because we've hit you with a lot of information in the last 90 minutes. But this takes that and you've got now a print copy of a lot of the things that we've talked about. And it gives you all kinds of examples and tips. And Heather has dropped the link to it in the chat box if you want to just be able to bookmark that. And so, yeah, it's really a great resource that has been made available for you. And feel free to share it with other people, because the more our community knows about what we do and the why, how, what, the better off we all are. The next slide, and back to you, Lakeisha.
Okay, so next we're going to talk a little bit about planning for professional development at WSSDA's annual conference. Is Heather still there? Heather, wait, you guys will know, you guys are candidates. What day is election day? Candidates, when is the finish line?
It's like the 4th or 5th of November, maybe.
Oh, good. Normally, I feel like WSSDA's annual conference is before election day, which I was like, I hope we move it. So look
Yep.
at that.
Yep.
You know, once you're past the finish
The
line.
4th. It's the 4th of November.
Oh, perfect. Okay, excellent choice. Well, WSSDA does have an annual conference where you will see a majority of our school board directors come together from across the state to really engage in a very long weekend of professional development training. There are tons of workshops offered to really help you kind of get engaged. They do have some pre-conferences workshop. One of them is called Board Boot Camp, which both Mary and I have done together for the last couple of years. It is a long stretch similar to today. A few more interactive activities. I want to be clear, there's a little bit more movement involved, but annual conference has a board boot camp that runs for about 5 hours that really kind of deep dives into some of the various areas that are required for your work. So once elected, please try and connect with your superintendent and board team, governance team, and see if you can attend annual conference. Okay, next slide. Oh, good. I already went over that. Annual conference or take it online.
And just so that people, it's very clear, this is because this is considered board professional development. I think every school district covers your costs for attending annual conference.
Most districts, yeah, we'll try.
And is the boot camp itself so it's the same days as the annual conference, but it's like its own.
It's the day before. It's a 5-hour pre-conference session. So it comes up, you would do that, and then the regular conference starts the following day.
So it just, because if we were to, put it on a calendar, would it be November 19th then, the
Nope,
boot
the
camp?
20th. It's the 20th.
It's the 20th,
the
yeah.
20th.
So it's actually
Okay.
the morning of the day that the conference starts. So it's all morning until about 2 p.m. and then the conference starts at 2:30. And then it's all day. So that's Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday ending midday. I'll also note that we're adding a sort of asterisk, given that it's a new election year. We're also going to note throughout the conference those sessions which are particularly applicable to new board members, so that there's a clear sense of the breakout sessions that might be most useful to attend if you're just getting your kind of getting started on the work of being a school board member.
And you said that if we can't attend, like maybe for our day jobs, we have a conflict, that it would be available online.
That's right. Board Boot Camp is available asynchronously
Okay.
for $90 for download. Once you're a board member, you can request to purchase that, and you can have that anytime.
Okay. Thank you.
It's a little bit more fun to be there in person. Lakeisha and Mary can speak to this probably. You get to know other board members, and these are colleagues that you have across the state. And they get to see each other sort of every year, and sometimes more than once a year. And so it's really nice to be in person, but to get the info is probably the priority. So getting that virtually is also a great option.
Excellent. Okay. No questions? Next slide. All right. So in the chat, what will you do as a result of what you learned here tonight to prepare for board service? Let's see. Is it appropriate for our school board directors to try to pursue community partnerships, specific grants, local nonprofit funding to support students and programs or otherwise? Oh, I think that's a good question. You do have to be pretty mindful of that, because if you're going to end up serving as a school board director, you might have to recuse yourself from some things. I will say personally, I have made some great connections. I've always asked my superintendent, is this helpful? Does this align with our strategic plan? Is this a part of our priorities? If she says yes, I normally make those connections and let the superintendent and her team take over all of that work.
Yeah.
I've done that. A good friend of mine, not toot my own horn here, but former pro athlete, and was like, oh my gosh, I want to help out. We came up with 300 backpacks, and I was like, awesome. Can I connect you with my superintendent? And of course the Rotary Club is phenomenal. They're like, come and be a Rotarian, and we're going to do all these scholarships. I was like, I love this for us. Made the connection with our superintendent. So I would just say, communicate with your board president, talk with your superintendent, make those connections, and let the working team do it instead of you, so that you don't have to recuse yourself or get in any trouble. I hope that
Yeah,
answers
I
your question.
totally agree with that. And that's actually, this is one of the beauties of having different people on the board who have different networks, because I'll to be able to make the connections for your, your superintendent in your district to bring services into your district to support your kids is pretty awesome. But again, making sure that you're acting as that connector so that the people who are, because this would be an operations piece, that they just have what they need to be able to take it from there.
Question, go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah, in the campaigning process, is there anything that we need to be aware of uh, from this is why I didn't type this, because I thought I could just say it because it wasn't exactly the wording, but are there any rules to our engagement, either with the superintendent or with staff, or are there any rules of engagement that we should be aware of in the campaigning process itself before election?
I'll respond to that because it's something that came up the other night. As a candidate, all the things we've talked about, you can do. Talk to the superintendent, talk to the community, and that's part of campaigning. It shifts once you're elected, but to be out asking questions and interacting with people as engagement, that's not a problem. The one thing that I will say, because this ended up creating a lot of work for me, is that if you are going to be doing or getting endorsements from people, you have to have their permission to include them as an endorsement. And if in general, they need to be endorsing you as a community member. If you, and this is where this line that I talked about earlier with what people see with elected officials at the state and the federal level, you can have a state representative or a congressional representative be an endorser for you, and that's okay to list their title. But for other people, what you have to do is get permission for them to say, if they're going to list, you're going to list their title, that in parentheses right next to their name, it says for purposes of identification only. Because in a governance body situation, if you're on there, let's just say it's for, you would put a school board member down, that conveys the impression that the entire school board has endorsed you, because that's going back to the fact that you don't have individual authority. And this happened to me in my state board role, where somebody listed me as an endorser in a statewide race, did not ask for my permission to put my title or any qualifier on it, just put my title there, which then resulted in me having to talk to the state attorney general's office with the person that's assigned to us, and talk to the executive ethics executive director, and write a letter to the person saying, you can't do this, please remove this from your website now. So that's the one thing I would be very cautious about in how you're doing that, so that it doesn't create false impressions, perceptions, and potentially, that could have been a problem for me if somebody had brought it to the attention of the ethics board before I was able to identify it and go, did not give my permission. What's my process for addressing this?
Perfect. Thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for.
I think I would add just, yeah, being mindful. One, superintendents are currently working, they're ramping up down the school year. Most of them are already prepping for next year. So I guess I would just reach out, but don't be disappointed if they're swamped or busy, or don't necessarily get back to you right away. And then the same thing with staff. I guess I would just be mindful, because if you move into the board superintendent role, there is some pretty clear boundaries. Staff can actually sue school board members, and that has happened. It has been in the news for making an unfriendly work environment. So you have to remember, your only employee is the superintendent. So that's a pretty big shift that I didn't even see coming. And so I would say being a school board director can feel a little isolating. When I was running, I was like, I'm going to gain so much like community. Then I got here and I was like, little bitty work section. So just kind of something to keep in mind. And I think I had to explain that to a lot of staff members, like, I don't have them on my Facebook page anymore. I don't really do any communicating with them. I don't call them. If it is work related, they have to call me on my district phone. And people were like a little mortified. I was like, yeah, don't call me. I'm not your neighbor anymore. You got to call me over here as a school board director, because it's got to be on record. I don't want anybody coming after my cell phone. So it does shift, and that can be hard. So I would just say being mindful that the power dynamic changes pretty quickly.
I just want to note, I put in just as a reminder, and people getting back to you, that just universally July is the time period that most school district employees have fled the coop. So do not be surprised if you don't get a response during that month. It's not personal. It's just they're taking their vacation.
Excellent. I'll take the last slide. I think it's the last one, Heather.
Yes, and it's closure.
Thank you. Look at that cute picture. We're here to support you. Obviously, the website is available. If you want to get a hold of Dr. Curl, Dr. Curl is available because she actually works full-time. That is her job. I
It
will
is
be
my
at
job.
work. But thank you so much for coming. Thank you for investing in the 1.1 million students in our state and choosing to come and serve and be a part of this dynamic, massive team that ushers forward public education.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.